twin suns of Terra 9 were setting behind the violet horizon, casting long, molten shadows across the rocky fields of New Eden Ranch. Cassian Rowe stood at the edge of his docking platform, arms crossed over his weathered fleet jacket, boots caked in the red dust of a planet he hadn't seen in 23 years. The whine of his personal interstellar transport cooling down behind him was the only sound, aside from the low hum of the perimeter shields realigning themselves. He was home. Finally. The place hadn't changed much, at least not to his eyes. The silver barn still stood against the hills like a sentinel, its solar skin shimmering faintly. The auto harvesters dotted the distant crop rows, asleep now but operational. He'd expected to see some wear, perhaps a little overgrowth, maybe even rust. But no, everything was clean. Too clean. That's when he noticed the surveillance drones hovering at the edge of the fence line, unfamiliar models, and not his. Cassian narrowed his eyes. A green light blinked from one of the hovering orbs, then turned red. A violation ping, probably. He knew the sound from his time in the fleet. He shook his head, chuckling to himself. I haven't even been back 5 minutes. His boots crunched against gravel as he walked toward the house. The autolock hissed open at his retinal scan, doors parting with a pneumatic sigh. The air inside was cold, sterile, not how he left it, and when he pulled up the ranch's AI interface, he found that his permissions were downgraded. Temporary access, guest level, what the hell? Before he could dig deeper, his comm implant buzzed against his skull. Incoming transmission from HOA Central, Block 9K, New Eden. Rural sector. The AI droned. Cassian rolled his eyes and accepted the call. The screen materialized in the air beside him, displaying a sharp-featured woman with platinum hair tied in an impossibly tight coil. She wore a cobalt blue uniform that looked like it belonged more to a planetary security force than a neighborhood committee. Her name tag read, Karen X42, Regional Compliance Director. Attention occupant, she said with exaggerated authority. You are currently in violation of New Eden HOA Charter subsection 14C, unauthorized landing of personal interstellar craft in a Class 4 agricultural zone. You have 3 minutes to vacate the vehicle or it will be impounded by orbital retrieval. Systems. Cassian blinked. This is my ranch. That may be, Karen X42 said, unmoved. However, during your absence, New Eden Ranch and surrounding properties were annexed under the New Terra Unified Residential Development Protocol. All residents are subject to charter law, regardless of previous ownership status. So you're telling me I can't park my own ship at my own ranch? Correct. Please comply immediately or enforcement will be dispatched. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. You know what? Send them. Let's get this over with. Karen X42 blinked once, her face a flawless mask of smug certainty. Very well, law enforcement unit en route. Have a pleasant evening. The call ended before he could respond. Cassian looked out the window toward the landing pad where his ship still idled under the rising moon. He didn't bother moving it. He wasn't about to be intimidated off his own land by a cybernetic HOA president with a superiority complex. He brewed a cup of synth-caf and sat down in the same chair he used to rock his son to sleep in. The place felt hollow without Riker. It had been years since their last message exchange, and even longer since they'd seen each other in person. Maybe this visit was a way to fix that. He wasn't sure. All he knew was he had earned this land, and no bureaucratic drone was going to tell him otherwise. The sound of a patrol hover cruiser split the air, and Cassian stood to meet it. He had no idea who was about to step out. Karen X42 glided down the polished steel hallway of the New Eden HOA Enforcement Center, her heeled boots clicking rhythmically like a war drum. Her movement was calculated, her posture impeccable, a model of bureaucratic power and artificially enhanced ego. She wasn't born Karen X42. Her original designation had been Karen Hellsworth, but after volunteering for the Enhanced Administrative Protocol program, she'd been fitted with neural augments, regulatory combat subroutines, and a direct uplink to the planetary compliance grid, all in the name of order. And order, as far as she was concerned, had been broken by the dusty, half-forgotten return of one Cassian Rowe. She reviewed the footage again as she stepped into her command bay. The man had landed a Class 7 military-grade Star Cruiser on a civilian agricultural lot, without clearance, without a beacon, and without filling out Form 1129 GZ. Unforgivable. "Pull all files on row, Cassian," she ordered the system. A projection bloomed in the air. Decorated fleet commander, multiple commendations for valor, formerly presumed retired and residing in the outer colonies. Property claim for New Eden Ranch verified, though dormant. No HOA charter agreement on file. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Exactly the kind of entitlement I'd expect from a military man," she muttered. The thing about people like him was they thought history gave them immunity from present law. They walked around with old medals and older grudges, expecting the galaxy to pause just because they came home. But this was her jurisdiction now. The HOA had brought peace and consistency to what was once a lawless stretch of planetary farmland. She'd turned chaos into compliance, and no rogue war hero was going to unravel her utopia. She returned to her desk and activated the enforcement mobilization protocol. "Deploy a ground enforcement officer," she commanded, one with high emotional neutrality scores. "I expect a clean removal and citation." A system beep interrupted her, an alert. Note: Subject Rowe is connected biologically to active law enforcement officer Riker Rowe, current sector sheriff. Her expression froze. She hadn't seen that coming. The irony burned through her like a bad firmware update. She had been trying for months to fold the local sheriff's office into the HOA's enforcement arm, but Riker Rowe was one of the few who'd refused. Professional, yes. Cooperative, no. Now it all made sense. The man was just like his father, defiant and independent to a fault. Karen exhaled, steeling herself. "Dispatch Riker Rowe anyway," she said. The system hesitated. "Conflict of interest detected." "Override," she snapped. "Perhaps this will show him what loyalty to the rule of law really looks like." Moments later, the call was dispatched. She watched the live feed of Riker's cruiser taking off, slicing through the twilight sky like a silver blade. She hoped he'd handle it quietly, but a part of her relished the possibility of fireworks. Family loyalty always crumbled under real pressure, especially when the rules were clear and absolute. She walked to the observation deck and looked out over the perfectly planned suburban sprawl that had replaced wild farmland. Drones trimmed hedges to the millimeter. Streetlights dimmed and brightened based on real-time foot traffic. Garbage bins sang cheerful tunes when emptied. This was her domain, her utopia. The return of Cassian Rowe was a rusted relic landing in the middle of perfection. She would file the proper notices, cite him until he begged for arbitration, and if necessary, have his ship dismantled for parts. Karen X-42 prided herself on being thorough. She turned back inside, her eyes already running simulations for possible escalation scenarios. Cassian would resist. People like him always did. But rules were rules, and she had upgraded her enforcement protocols last quarter. If Riker didn't do his duty, then Karen X-42 would take matters into her own titanium-lined hands. The patrol hover cruiser descended like a hawk preparing to strike, its underlights casting eerie glows across the dry grass and polished hull of Cassian's landed ship. Cassian stood on his porch, arms folded, watching it without flinching. Dust kicked up around his boots as the cruiser touched down, the engine hum slowly winding down. The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation. The hatch hissed open, and a tall figure stepped out, silhouetted against the light inside the cabin. Cassian narrowed his eyes. The figure moved with the rigid grace of someone trained in both military and civic protocol. The dark sheriff's coat, the glint of a badge. He recognized them instantly. Then came the unmistakable sound of a familiar voice, deeper now, more measured, but still carrying a note of fire beneath the surface. "Well, this is awkward." Cassian's expression cracked into the smallest smile. Riker, his son, stepped into full view, helmet tucked under one arm, hair longer than he remembered, eyes sharp as ever. For a moment, time folded in on itself. Cassian no longer saw the uniform. He saw a gangly teenager arguing with him about joining the enforcement academy instead of the fleet, saw the boy building drones in the barn, fixing hover bikes with grease on his cheeks. But now Riker stood taller, and the badge on his chest glinted with the weight of his choices. Cassian nodded toward the cruiser. Didn't expect to see you getting dispatched over a parking dispute. Riker sighed. Didn't expect to get called out to my father's ranch by a woman who thinks HOA charters are sacred scripture. Cassian chuckled, but Riker didn't laugh. Not yet. I assume you've already met Karen X-42? Riker said, stepping forward. Oh, she made quite the entrance. Threatened to impound my ship. Claimed my land was now under HOA control. Riker shook his head. She's been pushing those charter laws across all the rural sectors. Most folks roll over. You, of course, would land a warship just to provoke her. Cassian shrugged. Didn't provoke anyone. I just came home. Riker looked out across the ranch, his childhood home, his gaze lingering on the There was the question neither of them wanted to ask. Father and son, once torn apart by clashing views on order and independence, now stood face to face, both lawmen in their own right, on opposite ends of a system neither fully believed in. I stand with the people, Riker said, but I also swore to uphold planetary law. If you stay, there'll be fines, hearings, maybe worse. She's not letting this go. Cassian met his son's eyes. And you? What happens when law clashes with common sense? Riker hesitated. Then, slowly, he unclipped a citation disc from his belt and held it up. This is a formal notice, but I'm not enforcing anything tonight. Cassian took it, holding his son's gaze. Good to see you, kid. Riker nodded. Likewise. Just try not to blow up the HOA headquarters, all right? No promises. The sun rose early on Terra 9, casting golden light across the plains, and causing the domed windows of Cassian's ranch to shimmer like molten crystal. Inside, Cassian sat at his old workbench with the citation disc still resting untouched beside a steaming mug of synth-caf. The disc blinked red, a quiet threat, pulsing in time with the seconds. He hadn't slept. Too much had surfaced, memories, unresolved tensions, and now, complications layered in metallic blue and chrome-plated authority. He swiped the disc aside and turned back to the hollow panel. Schematics of the ranch's defense grid hovered in. The air, flickering slightly, outdated but still functional. He wasn't planning for war, but he'd be damned if he let a bureaucracy with facial recognition bots and gardening ordinances push him off the land he fought to earn. The workshop. Door creaked open. Riker stepped in, now in civilian clothes, though his badge still glinted on his belt. He glanced at the schematics and frowned. I hope that's nostalgia and not preparation, he said. Cassian smirked. Can it be both? Riker walked over, his eyes scanning the glowing interface. This is what I mean. You always think in terms of battle plans. But this isn't a war, Dad. It's zoning law. Cassian leaned back in his chair. Zoning law backed by combat drones and corporate enforcers. Don't try to dress up oppression just because it comes with paperwork and smiling androids. Riker looked away, jaw tight. I get it. You don't trust institutions. Never did. Cassian's tone softened. And you always did. Thought the law could fix what people couldn't. Riker didn't respond at first. He walked to the window, watching a convoy of HOA drones sweep silently through the adjacent valley, scanning for violations, overgrown vegetation, unregistered AI modules, fence height discrepancies. One veered toward the ranch perimeter but quickly retreated as it pinged Cassian's still active shield grid. She's coming back today, Riker said. Karen X-42. She's bringing a full compliance team. You're now officially flagged as a Class 2 obstructive resident. Cassian chuckled. She really gave me a promotion? Riker didn't laugh. That means she's authorized to use non-lethal force and begin repossession proceedings, and I won't be able to stop it. Not officially. The room grew quiet again. Cassian stood, stretching, his voice thoughtful. What happened to you after I left? Riker blinked. The question came from nowhere. What? I left you and your mother here while I ran missions halfway across the stars. When I came back, she was gone, and you barely spoke to me. Then, you vanished into the sheriff's program. I never got to ask. Riker took a long breath. Mom died. You were off-world and unreachable. I handled the estate, the funeral, everything. No fleet honor guard, just me and a dusty local preacher. After that, I didn't see much use in chasing medals. I figured someone should protect this place from the ground up. Cassian's face hardened with guilt. I should have been there. Yeah, you should have. They let the silence stand for a moment. Heavy, but necessary. Finally, Cassian placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you, Riker. Even if we've fought about everything since you were old enough to talk. Back. Riker nodded slowly. I don't want to fight you now, but you've got to find a way to de-escalate this. Karen's not going to stop. Cassian smiled wryly. She doesn't have to stop. She just has to hesitate long enough. Riker raised an eyebrow. What are you planning? Something legal enough to buy us time and loud enough to remind her who built this land. Riker sighed. Just don't make me choose between you and the law. Cassian's eyes narrowed, a gleam of mischief sparking. Then let's rewrite the law before you have to. Outside, the dust began to rise again. Karen X-42 was on her way. The caravan of chrome and blue compliance vehicles crested the ridge like a parade of wolves in polished armor. 8 in total, 2 drone transports, 3 land enforcement cruisers, a portable arbitration unit, and, at the center of it all, a command skiff bearing the new Eden HOA insignia, a pristine lawn bordered by surveillance cameras. Cassian stood alone on the front porch of his ranch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The wind tugged at the edges of his old fleet jacket, the same one he'd worn the day he left Terra 9 for the outer colonies. This time, he wasn't flying away from anything. He watched as Karen X-42 descended from her hovercraft, flanked by 2 tall compliance officers in reflective armor. She looked even more cybernetic up close now, her facial features unnervingly smooth, eyes faintly glowing with internal HUD readouts. She carried a datapad like a weapon and a smile like a blade. Cassian Rowe, she called out, voice amplified and sterile. Final warning. You are in clear violation of New Eden HOA Charter Code 14C, subsection 9.1. Your ship remains unlawfully parked. Your structures lack current certifications. And your perimeter defense grid, while outdated, is considered a public safety risk. Under Clause 17, I am authorized to seize assets, shut down your power, and have you forcibly removed if non-compliance continues. Cassian descended the porch steps, boots grinding into the gravel. He walked straight toward her, slow and calm, until they stood only a few feet apart. I didn't fight pirates, rogue AI swarms, and the collapse of 2 planetary colonies, he said evenly, just to be told where to park by a woman with laser-level eyes and a code book for a soul. Karen's smile widened by exactly 0.3%. Your past is irrelevant. This is a civil matter, and civil law is absolute. Please do not escalate this, Mr. Rowe. Cassian took a breath. Too late for that. At that moment, Riker's patrol cruiser rose into view over the horizon, sirens off but lights flashing. It stopped behind the compliance caravan and slowly lowered to the ground. Riker stepped out, alone, hands clearly visible. He was in uniform again. Karen turned to him, satisfied. Sheriff Rowe, as the local law enforcement authority, I now request your official cooperation in executing charter-backed enforcement action against this non-compliant resident. Riker approached, nodding once. Acknowledged. Cassian watched. His son carefully. No signal, no hesitation. Just duty. Riker stepped between his father and the compliance officers, then held up a small cylindrical device. He pressed it, and a projection activated, flashing text, signatures, and a seal from the planetary registrar's office. Karen's brow twitched. What is this? Riker turned to her, voice cool. A legal pause directive. My father filed a temporary injunction against charter enforcement under the Land Inheritance and Veteran Protection Act. He submitted his claim an hour ago. The registrar flagged it for immediate review. Until that review is complete, no HOA action can be taken without violating planetary rights statutes. Karen's processors whirred silently. That law is obsolete. Riker didn't blink. Obsolete doesn't mean repealed. Cassian smiled. Turns out I know how to file. Paperwork too. Karen X-42 stared at the two of them, her internal logic tree branching into 1,000 possible actions. But she couldn't move. Not yet. The law she worshipped now held her back. This isn't over, she said, eyes narrowing. Your injunction expires in 72 hours. Cassian turned away. Then you've got 72 hours to prepare for the next round. As the caravan withdrew, Riker stood beside his father, watching the dust trail vanish. That buys us time, Riker said quietly. But not peace. Cassian nodded. Peace is something you build, brick by brick, or tear down, wall by wall.